Hello everybody and welcome to my YouTube channel. Today we're going to be going over the top tips to dominate your fantasy league in 2018. If you're one of those guys that consistently year by year get knocked out in the first round of your playoffs, or you continue to struggle with trying to understand how to play fantasy football, today we're going to go over tips and tricks to dominate your league to make sure that you don't think it's luck anymore. Fantasy football is no longer luck, and with these tips and tricks, you can understand how to be successful, number one, and be able to manipulate your league to the point to where you can be successful yourself and win a championship so you can brag to your friends and just feel good on Sundays. Because, you know, that feeling when you lose your fantasy week on a Sunday, and going into Monday, that's not a feeling you want on a weekly basis. So we're going to try to give you the best tips and tricks to kind of mitigate that issue. So let's get right into it. But before I do so, I want to ask everybody to subscribe to my YouTube channel for more content or leave a like below. And let's get into the top tips and tricks. Also, timestamps will be below. Hey everybody, how's it going? So the first tip or trick that just came to my mind, in no particular order, we're going to go over 10 things. But number one that came to my mind is you don't win your fantasy league from your draft. Okay, so what does that mean, Andrew? What does that exactly mean? Well, the team that you draft in September before your league begins is not the team you're going to have at week 16 in the fantasy playoffs, in your fantasy championship. Over the weeks, players are going to get injured. Players are going to be traded. Players are just not going to show up and participate and give you fantasy value. Therefore, you will go to the waiver wire. You will trade. You will drop players. And your team will no longer be the same, right? That team that you draft in August, September is not going to be the team that you have later. So despite how terrible you draft, at the end of the day, you don't win, or even how well you draft, you don't win your league from day one. It's a process. It's a 16-week grind, and you got to put in the work. You got to put in the time and the effort in order to be successful in fantasy football. So let's say, for example, I get the first overall pick. I draft Todd Gurley. My draft is looking great. Everything works out perfectly. But at the end of the day, that's not going to guarantee success. Success comes from being able to manipulate the waiver wire to pick up valuable pieces for your bench. Maybe even pick up pieces that will end up starting and carrying your team. Being able to trade and understand the value of trades so you can trade with others. I always kind of preach the idea that waiver wire pickups, without a doubt, and trading can win your league. Because at the end of the day, if you can improve your team on a weekly basis, you're going to be better than anybody else in your league, especially those that don't want to use the waiver wire, that think, well, my team is good, and they're satisfied with that. You can't approach fantasy football that way. Fantasy football, especially in 2018, especially when you play in bigger leagues, 12-team leagues, the way I see it, you have to continuously work to try to make your team better so you don't win at the draft, plain and simple. Now, that being said, you can definitely lose your league at the draft. If you come out and you draft a quarterback number one overall in a standard league, and then you don't draft any running backs, you take a kicker in the third, you can lose your draft. You can definitely lose your league by doing that. Excuse me. I'm just mumbling over myself. You can definitely lose your league with terrible strategies and just nonchalantly going about it. Now, that could be fun for some people at the end of the day, but those people aren't looking to win the league. You can't win your league doing that, plain and simple. So at the end of the day, my first tip, you don't win your league from your draft, no matter what you end up with. Like last year, I ended up with, in a 2-quarterback league, Superflex, I ended up with Kirk Cousins, Eli Manning as my 2 quarterbacks, and Sam Bradford as my 3rd quarterback. Okay? Those are not 3 good quarterbacks. Eli Manning and Sam Bradford were not on my squad by the end of the year. Kirk Cousins was, but Eli Manning and Sam Bradford were not on my team. So that team that you have in week 1 is not going to be the same team you have in week 16. It depends on how you approach it, how you pick up, how you trade, and how you improve your team on a weekly basis. Okay? So that's tip number 1. You don't win your fantasy league from the draft. Okay? So let's go into tip number 2. So that's running backs, right? A lot of people on a yearly basis, say running backs should be the number one overall pick for your team. Without a doubt in my mind, it should be that, blah, blah, blah. You should always draft a running back. Well, I'm here to tell you that 100% is the truth. No matter what league you play in, okay? If you play in a standard league, if you play in a half point or full point PPR, if you play in super flex leagues, the fact of the matter is having a workhorse running back to carry your team is the way to go. In 2018, when running backs are being able to catch the ball 60 times out of the backfield for 500 yards and 6 receiving touchdowns like Todd Gurley did last year, that kind of value there is no substitute for. So at the end of the day, yes, there are 5 stud running backs in this coming 2018 draft, right? So you're thinking to yourself, well, Andrew, what if I don't have a top 5 pick? I understand. You can, especially if you play in a standard league, I think it's way easier being able to take a running back at 6, 7, or 8. That's great. And then maybe a wide receiver at 9. If you play in full point PPR leagues, Antonio Brown will probably go 6th, right? So you won't be drafting that running back. In half point PPR leagues, that's where it's a coin toss. That's why I like to play in half point PPR leagues, because there's not a defined line on whether I should draft that wide receiver at 6 or that running back at 6. So the way I see it, you always need to put your team's weight on a running back that can carry your team, plain and simple. Especially if you have 2 running backs. If your first 2 round picks are stud running backs and you can right out the gate see, okay, I got my 2 running backs, my stable, my workhorse stable is right there, set, then you just have to build around them. You have to build consistent players, consistent quarterback play, consistent receivers, consistent tight ends, because those running backs are going to produce on a weekly basis. As long as you can fill the slots around them with consistent players, you're going to have a successful, overall team to help you win in fantasy. So plain and simple, don't go into your first round drafting a quarterback or a wide receiver. In my opinion, running backs are supreme. I understand in some leagues you may be thinking, well, I have no choice. I have to take Antonio Brown at 6. Well, if you have to do so, make sure your next pick is a running back, because running backs are extremely valuable, plain and simple. Especially when, I'm telling you, a couple years back, David Johnson had 70 receptions for 800 yards. He was practically a wide receiver 1 just because of the wide receiver stats on top of the 1,300 rushing yards he had and 12 rushing touchdowns. I'm telling you why these workhorse top 5 running backs, irreplaceable, and they can win you the league, plain and simple. So that's my second tip. Draft a workhorse running back, plain and simple. Okay, let's move on to tip number 3. Handcuffs, right? See some running backs on the screen. We got Devontae Freeman on your left and Tevin Coleman on the right. So what is a handcuff? I've talked about this in my past videos, and I've tried to explain it the best I can. It's literally when a starting wide receiver, quarterback, tight end, or running back, any of those positions, right? When the starting player, right, let's say, for example, like Devontae Freeman, gets injured, their backup, the guy next to him, number 26, takes majority of the carries and the fantasy production for the following weeks that the starter is injured, right? So a handcuff is someone, especially because, every running back has a backup in this league, right? Usually every team has 2 tight ends or 4 wide receivers, but there are 2 main stable running backs. So if my starting running back is to get injured, I need the backup in order to absorb that fantasy value, So if Devontae Freeman's getting handed off the ball 20 times a game and he gets injured, well, who's going to get the ball 20 times a game? It's Tevin Coleman. So I need that fantasy production. So when you go out and you draft a Todd Gurley or a Le'Veon Bell or a Ezekiel Elliott or David Johnson, like I'm telling you to, because running backs they reign supreme in fantasy. The way I see it, you need to figure out who the handcuff is of your high-valued running back, and you need to stock them onto your bench in order to make sure that no matter what happens, maybe the guy comes out and breaks his wrist first game of the season, tears his ACL, that you're prepared to be able to pick up the production of that specific player. So that's what a handcuff is. Now, the way I see it, you have to understand who the handcuff is. There's a little bit of research that needs to be done, right? You have to kind of pay attention to training camp, pay attention a little bit in preseason to see who's getting those reps after that starting running back is no longer in the game, right? Being able to identify a handcuff is often difficult because there are some backfields in the NFL that have 4 running backs. So those are a little bit tricky and more of a gamble. But running backs handcuffs like the Atlanta Falcons, specifically, I'm using this picture on purpose. Every time Devontae Freeman is injured, Tevin Coleman's going to take those carries. And he's a hell of a running back also. So at the end of the day, my third tip is draft handcuffs and make sure that your high-valued running backs or wide receivers or tight ends are catered for, especially if they have a history of injury. Because at the end of the day, if you're not the one that has the handcuff for your specific high-value player, somebody else is going to go and they're going to take that player, and you're going to be like, well, just like last year, right? Last year, Spencer Ware was the starting running back in the preseason for the Kansas City Chiefs. Guess what? He got injured. Kareem Hunt came in. Kareem Hunt took over the league. Plain and simple. That kind of thing, right? Being able to identify who the backup is and just, you're not hoping, but at the end of the day, if something does go wrong, you're prepared to be able to start a player and be successful and win games in fantasy. So let's move on to the next topic or tip. Okay, the fourth tip I have, right? No particular order. Number 4, don't put all of your eggs in one basket. So what does that mean, Andrew? Why are there eggs? I like eggs and bacon, but at the end of the day, what I'm talking about is you don't want to draft too many players from a singular team. So let's say, for example, I am a huge fan of the Green Bay Packers, okay? That's for example, okay? I go out and I draft Aaron Rodgers, Devontae Adams, Randall Cobb, Ty Montgomery, and Jimmy Graham, right? I have 5 Packers all in my starting lineup. That is a terrible strategy in fantasy football. You never want to have more than 2 of a specific team on your fantasy team. Like the most you ever want to have is a quarterback receiver, running back receiver, running back tight end, quarterback tight end. You never want to have 3 different players from the same team, because at the end of the day, you're putting too much inherent risk in having those players. Let's say, for example, you have all 5 Packers players. They play the Seahawks in week whatever, and they get smacked 42-0. You're going to lose that fantasy week because you put all the eggs in one basket. You put it in the Green Bay basket. And at the end of the day, if that Green Bay basket doesn't end up winning, not even just winning, producing fantasy-wise, you're not going to be successful in fantasy football. So my suggestion is, without a doubt, as soon as you stock up and you see, okay, I already have Phillip Rivers and Keenan Allen, you don't want to draft any more San Diego Chargers, no matter what. Let's say, for example, there's a legit possibility, let's say, for example, in super flex leagues, okay? You go with your first 2 round picks, Melvin Gordon and Keenan Allen, and you come into your 3rd round pick, you're like, I need a quarterback. Oh my God, Phillip Rivers is there. If you draft Phillip Rivers, you're putting all your eggs in the San Diego Charger basket. By doing so, if the San Diego Chargers get smacked by the Kansas City Chiefs in week 2, well, you're going to most likely lose your fantasy week, because there are too many inherent risks in having all these players on one team. Now, you could say, hey, what if they all just pop off on a weekly basis? Well, if they do, good for you. But at the end of the day, I don't want to take the risk of having so many players on one roster, potentially pulling me down. So that's my 4th tip. Don't put all your eggs in one basket. Okay. So tip number 5, rookies. Okay. Know your rookies. Last year, on the screen above, we have Kareem Hunt on the right, like I was talking about earlier, and we have Alvin Kamara on the left. Knowing your rookies for the coming season is an extremely valuable aspect of fantasy football. Okay. Ooh, what the heck was that? Anyway, Last year, Alvin Kamara and Kareem Hunt were two of the top 4 running backs in half-point PPR scoring for running backs. So 2 of the rookies, right here on your screen, right here, were top 4 running backs throughout the entire season, right? So the people that were able to draft these players, put it on their bench, and hope that these rookies were going to pop off, well, they were paid handsomely by the production that they brought on a weekly basis. So this coming year, when you think, okay, who's the best rookie? The name Saquon Barkley is going to come out, right? Because he was the 2nd overall pick. He was a Heisman Trophy candidate this last season. I'm not talking about those kind of rookies, right? Those high-name profile guys like Christian McCaffrey was last year, right? Yes, he had value, but at the end of the day, we knew he was going to have value, right? I'm talking about the rookies that no one's talking about. I'm talking about Royce Freeman, Ronald Jones, Sony Michael, those running backs, right? Now you're like, oh my God, what are you talking about? Who are these guys? Rashad Penny, yes, he's talked about a little bit, but not too many people, bring the name up. Nick Chubb, Darius Geis. These are the running backs that you have to keep your eyes open for because they can legit win your league. Okay. Now there's other rookies, right? There's Michael Gallup, who's a wide receiver. Christian Kirk, who's a wide receiver. There's rookie quarterbacks such as Josh Rosen or Josh Allen, Baker Mayfield, Lamar Jackson. There's a plethora of rookies coming into the league this year that could have fantasy value, right? So the entire thing that I'm trying to preach here is know who the rookies are, do some research, and see which of these rookies are going to have value. Which of these rookies are going to have opportunities to score? Who's a backup? Who's the starter for week 1? If you can kind of pinpoint that, draft these rookies that I've named in later rounds, you can 100% win your league because nobody else is drafting these guys. They'll be taking picks like Ted Ginn while you take a risk on Michael Gallup, and then, perhaps in week 4, he becomes the number 1 receiver for the Dallas Cowboys. And you end up winning your league because they don't have a number 1 receiver. Stuff like that. So know your rookies. Understand how the backfield or wide receiver situations are, how much opportunity they have, so that you can determine, okay, is it worth drafting this guy? Because if it is, and they do, they end up like Kamara and Hunt did last year, you can 100% win your league. I won with Kareem Hunt on my team. Why? Because nobody was paying attention. Spencer Ware got injured, and I picked him up off the waivers. Won the league. Plain and simple. Let's move on to the next one. Okay, so my next tip is research, right? So I've been saying it for the last thing. You got to do some research. You got to do this. You got to research this. You got to research this. But at the end of the day, you don't want to be the guy that comes into your league. You don't want to be the guy that comes into the draft not knowing jack. If you do, and you're okay with that, and you don't want to win your league, sure, go ahead. Go ahead. Maybe you win a couple games early, but at the midway through the season, you're going to start to drop off. You want to do some research, understand where people are drafting specific players, understand what kind of value they have. Because if you can get a better understanding of the value of a specific running back or receiver or quarterback, you'll understand, okay, maybe I don't have to draft him this early. Maybe I should draft him earlier. Getting a better understanding, like, let's say, for example, right, you go into your draft and you're like, okay, well, I'm going to use the ESPN top 200 to draft my team. I'm just the next best player, auto pick. Next best player, auto. You can't go into your league and expect to be successful that way. Auto drafting is not going to cut it anymore because at the end of the day, a lot of the rankings are jacked up. You'll end up with Isaiah Crowell and Lamar Miller and some other Carlos Hyde as your top 3 running backs, and then you're going to be wondering, what happened there? Well, your wide receivers are going to be stacked, but at the end of the day, when you don't have running backs because you auto-drafted, it's going to suck. So my 100% tip here is do your research, do a couple mock drafts here and there, right? Try to get an understanding of, especially if you're in a league where you are told what pick you're going to be prior to the draft. If you're in those kind of leagues, which I suggest you are in, you get yourself into, or you tell your commissioner to change it, If you're in a league like that, 100% do some mocks. Do a mock draft from the position you're going to be drafting from, and just practice. Because at the end of the day, if you practice it and you kind of get an idea of what kind of players you're going to be getting, it'll make it easier for you to approach your draft and be more successful, plain and simple. And also, you can do research other than the draft. You can do research within the season and see, okay, well, this guy got injured. There's 3 other running backs that are going to take the spot. Who's going to be the benefactor of this handcuff situation, right? It's all about research. You got to be able to commit to it. Okay, so that's my what was that? The 6th tip or 7th, if I'm not mistaken. Anyway, so let's move on to the next. Okay, so I just went over it, right? Research. Now, my next tip, all right, what do I want to call this? This is called stalking, okay? I'm going to call this be a stalker, okay? What I mean by be a stalker is you want to be able to, on a weekly basis, know what's going on, know what players are injured, know who's not practicing, know who's getting extra first-team reps, right? And how do I do that? Well, I do it with SleeperBot, right? SleeperBot's an app. It gives you fantasy alerts on a daily basis with anything that happens. If a coach says something about a player, you'll know about it. You'll get a notification. If someone didn't practice today, you'll get a notification, right? This is not an ad for SleeperBot, but let me tell you, it helped me all of last season, right? This is a fairly new company, but they continue to update their app. You can do mocks off of their iPhone or Android app. Without a doubt, it is 100% going to help you throughout the entire year. Now, what's special about this also, you can specifically add the players that are on your fantasy team so that they give you updates only for those guys. So that, let's say, for example, you have Andrew Luck on your team and you're wondering how's his shoulder, you'll get continuous weekly updates on, oh, did he throw today in practice? Is he feeling better? What did the interview say? And there'll be a link to the interview. Oh, I'm feeling better, blah, blah, blah. SleeperBot app, just look it up, download it. It's extremely helpful for fantasy football. And if you're a football fan, you'll get an extra dosage of news on top of it. So that's my latest tip. Not an ad. I am not being paid by SleeperBot, even though I wish I was. But at the end of the day, plain and simple, download this app. It'll be extremely helpful for you. Okay, so next, right? Player studs. Okay, so what does that mean, Andrew? Who's on? It's Aaron Rodgers, right? Aaron Rodgers is a stud. But what does that mean, the player studs? Okay, so on a weekly basis, right? You'll look at your team and you'll think, well, Blake Bortles is playing against the Minnesota Vikings defense. Can I trust Blake Bortles to play against a good defense? Or, let's say, for example, I don't know, who's a decent wide receiver. Let's say, for example, Adam Thielen. Adam Thielen's on the Vikings. So let's do the reverse, okay? Blake Bortles is playing against the Vikings defense, and Adam Thielen, who's on the Vikings, is playing against the Jaguars defense, okay? Now, those are not good matchups for either of those players because Adam Thielen's going to be covered up by either Jalen Ramsey or A.J. Boye, and the pass rush and the coverage of the Viking defense is going to murder Blake Bortles, right? So when you get into that week and you're thinking, man, can I even start these players? Adam Thielen's going to be blanketed by those cornerbacks, and can Blake Bortles play against the Vikings? Well, at the end of the day, if it's me, you got to play your studs, right? If your best quarterback on your roster is Blake Bortles, you got to play him. If your best wide receiver on your roster is Adam Thielen, you have to play him, right? Don't be afraid of defenses. That's what I'm trying to say. Don't be afraid of matchups, okay? If, let's say, for example, you have Ezekiel Elliott and he's playing against the Denver defense, but the Denver defense is the best rushing defense in the league. They allow the least amount of rushing yards on a weekly basis. At the end of the day, I'm still starting Ezekiel Elliott. Why? Because I would rather Ezekiel Elliott suffer in my starting lineup than go off on my bench. Because how bad am I going to feel if he goes off on my bench? At the end of the day, I say play your studs on a weekly basis, especially Aaron Rodgers, right? In my opinion, Aaron Rodgers should start against every defense no matter what. There are a lot of quarterbacks that are exactly that way. That as soon as you draft them, like top 5 quarterbacks like Tom Brady, Aaron Rodgers, Russell Wilson, Carson Wentz, and sometimes like Phillip Rivers, but it depends. Or maybe even Matthew Stafford. Like those top 6 guys, you can start against any defense. Because at the end of the day, you're probably not going to have a better backup. And you got to trust that they are skilled enough because of what they've done in the past to be able to produce in the future, plain and simple. So play your studs 100% no matter what the position is. If they are the best player on your roster, they should be starting no matter what the defense is in front of them. Okay, let's go to my next tip. Know your league's rules, okay? So if you're in a league and you've just made this fantasy league with your friends, or you're joining a league where you're paying $100 and you're getting into it, winner takes all or something. At the end of the day, you need to understand and know the league rules. You have to know whether it's a PPR league. You have to know how many positions there are, right? How many quarterbacks are we starting? How many running backs are we starting? Receivers, tight ends, defenses, kickers. Understand that. Understand the waiver procedures. Is it a weekly rolling waiver list? Is it FAB, which is bidding for waiver position or waiver players? Understand what the trading policy is. Is it a league vote veto, or is it the commissioner voting for it individually? Understand your league rules, because there have been countless times that I have heard of people getting screwed over because their commissioner has a dirty rule that'll prevent anybody from getting better, right? So I've heard of where there's leagues where everybody will veto you just because they know they don't want you to get a better team. Everybody will avoid trading with you. Stuff like that can't happen. You got to know your league rules. Make sure that the commissioner is a trustworthy person. Make sure you understand how the scoring goes and how many positions there are, so when you get to your draft, you can be more successful, right, at the end of the day. So that's that tip. Just know your league rules, because there have been countless instances where people will just lose their league because they just didn't know or they didn't understand. And I'm telling you, go check out your league rules and get a better understanding so that you can't get screwed over as the weeks go by. Okay, so I'm going to get to my last rule. We've only been going for a little bit of time, so no big deal. Last rule, okay? Have fun. Plain and simple. Just have fun, right? It's fantasy football at the end of the day, right? This is not life and death. If you're playing in that high roller stakes league, okay, then you can go ahead and freak out about your quarterback tearing their ACL or your running back tearing their ACL. But at the end of the day, if you're playing in a home league, a league that's not playing for a lot of money, at the end of the day, you can have fun. You can draft, Aaron Rodgers in the first round. I'm not going to suggest it, but if that's your favorite player and that'll make your experience that much better, it'll give you more enjoyment at the end of the day, go for it. Just have fun. Enjoy your league. Enjoy talking smack to people. Don't make it so serious, right? If it gets to a point where it's extremely serious and everyone's like chomping at the bit to try to win, that can be fun too in its own, right? Because everyone's talking shit to each other. But at the end of the day, have fun. Understand that without a doubt, right? People play fantasy because it's a game. And why do we play this game? To beat our friends at the end of the day, right? Because we want to talk shit. We want to enjoy that aspect. Have fun. Enjoy the experience. It only comes around for 16 of the 52 weeks in a year. So, at the end of the day, it's a quarter of the year and it doesn't last forever. I would say, without a doubt, this may be the important one, the most important one, which is have fun. Because if you take it too seriously and you get butthurt when teams are beating you on a weekly basis and no one wants to trade with you, then no one's going to want to play with you anymore. So just have fun, enjoy your league. Those are my 10 tips to dominate your league. Again, I'll go over them. You don't win your league off of your draft. Draft a running back because the league is ran on running backs, plain and simple. know handcuffs, know your handcuffs, learn about rookies for this coming season, play your studs, understand your league rules. Don't put all your eggs in the basket of one team. Do your research, and last but not least, have fun. Anyway, I want to thank everybody for watching. Those are 10 tips to help you dominate your league in this coming season. My next video is probably going to be about drafting, because it's such an important part. Yes, you don't win your league off of your draft, but you can lose it. So we're going to talk about in my next episode how you can go about not losing your league off of that very essential draft in the beginning. Thank you for watching. Please like, share, and subscribe, and I'll see you next time.